Shop in bulk?
Sometimes, yeah. And that could be useful. So we're making fewer trips to the grocery store during the pandemic.
Registered dietitian Heidi Harkopf from New England Dairy is joining us now to give us advice on how to manage those big shopping trips. This is always a conundrum of mine, Heidi.
You don't want to throw anything away.
And I believe with more than I ever should have.
You know, isn't that true? It is really, it takes a lot of strategy to shop once a week, once every 2 weeks, and not let food go to waste, but also you want to fill your house with nourishing foods, right? So I wanted to give you some tips today, especially on storing dairy and how do you store that for the long haul. So now, early in the pandemic, I think a lot of people found themselves really valuing dairy both for its health and wellness and just to add joy to their life. And a lot of people are bringing home milk and asking, can I freeze it? Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, you can freeze milk. So what you want to do when you freeze milk is just drain off the first 2 inches of the container, because do you remember from science, water expands. If you put it in the freezer like this, it needs some space to freeze. So you want to drain off a little bit. When you thaw it, don't thaw it on the counter. Keep it in the refrigerator for a day or 2. That's the safest way to thaw anything. And when you take it out, you just probably need to give it a good vigorous shaking. And what you'll find is that the milk tastes just like it did before it went in the freezer. Now, if it stayed there for a few months, you might detect a slight off flavor. Have either of you tried freezing your milk before?
I have not, Heidi, but I think it's very interesting. And when you take it out of the freezer, what do? Do you give it a certain amount of days for shelf life? How do you know when it expires?
It should still be good for 5 to 7 days, like milk would be anyways. Of course, your expiration date's not going to help you anymore, right? Because it's been sitting in the freezer. So that probably has passed. But I would give it 3-5 days. You know what? The sniff test is a great way to know if your milk is still good. I will say when you thaw it, though, if it's been in the freezer for multiple weeks or a month or 2, if you detect a slight off flavor, because anything that's frozen might happen to, it's safe. It's fine. You might just want to use that milk then in your cereal where the cereal changes the flavor, or like if you like oatmeal packets and you put milk in your oatmeal for that extra protein. That's a great way to use milk that might have had a slightly off flavor. But I find if it's been stored for like a week or 2, I can't tell the difference. But like I said, give it a good shake. But did you know that you can also freeze yogurt as well?
I did not know that.
No, I didn't know.
So
I mean, I guess you can make yogurt
tubs
popsicles.
of yogurt. I don't get to the bottom as quickly as I think I'm going to. And what I do then is put yogurt into ice cube trays like this, and I freeze it. And what's great about that is that when I go to make my smoothies, I just have to pop a few yogurt cubes in it, and it gives it a bit of that icy richness, creaminess that I really like in my smoothie.
That's such a great tip. Heidi, that's such a great tip. So if you were going to do that, maybe even just want to do it to make it easier. I've seen people freezing smoothie bags, but how many cubes of that yogurt should you ideally use for your average smoothie?
I use about 4 or so.
Okay.
That would be like a third of a cup or so of yogurt in a smoothie.
Okay.
And if you want, you were talking about stocking up to get good bargains before. So if you purchase yogurt, even single serve ones, the fruited one, you can stick these in the freezer as well. And again, thaw them in the refrigerator. Like with the milk, it's going to need a good vigorous stirring when it's thawed, but you can hardly detect any difference. And it's a great way to take advantage of sales. Plus, we're coming into snowstorm season, right?
Absolutely.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, well, not quite yet, but we're getting there, Heidi.
And the important thing would be that if you're buying in bulk, that you come home and as you're putting the groceries away, you put them in the freezer then, not after they've already been out for a week or so.
That's a great point, Kara. The quality you start with is the quality you're going to have when you take it out of the freezer. So it is a great idea to put it in as soon as you can. You don't want to wait till it's on its last legs. Sometimes you can, though. So where I would say is like if you stockpiled and after a few days you think, wow, I'm really not going through this at the speed I thought, it's still time to put that in the freezer.
Okay.
So, for example, if you have some cheese at home, like here's a part of a brick of cheese I have left. And if I'm not going to get to it as quick as I thought, even after a few days, I would wrap this up in wax paper or parchment paper, put it in aluminum foil, and stick that in the freezer. Of course, don't forget to label it, because you know how that becomes like the deep pit of unknowns, the freezer. So you want to be sure you label things so you know what it is. And if you pick up some shredded cheese, this is my favorite hack. I keep these in the freezer. And if I have a casserole that I'm making that night, frozen, right out of the freezer, you can top your casserole with the frozen cheese and pop it in the oven. Now, cheese that you've frozen, you want to use just the the medium hard to the hard ones. The softer cheeses like cottage cheese and ricotta, that'll change texture when you take it back out again. But the harder ones really do well in the freezer. You'll want to use them for baking though and cooking versus serving on a cheese platter because it will change the consistency a little bit. If you want to learn more, we have information about freezing dairy products on our blog at newenglanddairy.com. You can also learn a lot about the dairy farmers in our state who produce these wonderful products through ctdairy.org.
I love the tip about reducing the milk by about 2 inches on the top because I never would have thought to do that.
And
that's
then
such
it
a great,
maybe explode, right?
explode. So that's such a great idea, Heidi.
I also understand the plastic ones work well. The cardboard ones, because they're seams, you have to be a little bit careful that you really do drain off enough because the seam could expand and get some leakage later on.
Okay, some really great tips. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Heidi.
You're welcome. Nice to see you both.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. All right, for more information, you can visit ctdairy.org. I'm going to have to get a lot of cheese for making my mac and cheese, and then I can freeze it if I don't
never
use
knew
it.
that you could freeze milk. So
I didn't either, and I would have been terrified to do it.
I would have been terrified to do it,
But Heidi is the expert, so if she says we can, then we can.
You can also check out newenglanddairy.com.